I am Michael Krigsman. This is episode number 138 of CXOTalk. And today we're talking about digital transformation. We're talking about digital transformation. We're talking with Chris Curran, who is Chief Technologist and Principal at PWC, and has been doing research on digital transformation and the linkage to performance for a number of years. Chris, thank you so much for joining episode number 138 of CXOTalk.
Hey, Michael, thanks so much. 138 episodes, that's amazing. Anyway, thanks for having me. Look forward to spending some time talking about all things digital and our digital IQ survey, which we just launched a couple of weeks ago, which we've been running since 2007, to look at some of the leadership behaviors and priorities for companies who report top performance, and try to help give all leaders across the world some insight into what some leading companies are doing to get the most out of digital.
Well, your survey is a large one. How long have you been running the survey for?
So I think this is our 7th year, and this year is our largest survey. We've got 2,000 business and IT leaders who participate across 50 countries and I believe about 25 industry sectors. Something that makes the survey unique is that it's not an IT survey, it's not a CIO survey, it's a leadership survey where we look for input across the board, from CEOs to CFOs to heads of HR and CISOs and CIOs and across the board, to try to understand their perspectives on information technology and digital. And when I say digital, I mean the big D digital, capital D, right? Enterprise application of technology, not the little d, just marketing or customer facing technology. But that's part of the process of learning and communicating to in the marketplace and with our clients, is trying to help them figure out what they mean by it and what they hope to get out of it.
And actually, we already had a comment from Twitter, Chris. Somebody is asking, how do you define digital, and how do you define transformation in this context?
Well, we define digital, and in fact, we define digital IQ as the degree to which an organization weaves information technology into everything they do, from strategy through execution, customers, employees, operations, innovation, the whole gamut of the enterprise. And so, the definition of digital is a great conversation, because as technologists, we've always been digital, and so with the latest round of buzz around the word digital is puzzling to some. And I had my aha moments a few years ago when the digital term was coming back in vogue, and a buddy of mine who runs a small ad agency here in Dallas was telling me about his perspectives on it. And it's as simple as the ad agency's terminology of talking about the channels in which they communicate. So there's the radio channel and the TV channel and the print channel and the digital channel. And so digital, I guess the renewed sense of interest in digital from his perspective came out of the agencies talking about their digital channels versus the thing we've been calling digital all along, which is information technology and data and analytics and all that good stuff. So that was an awakening for me, as a sort of understanding those different perspectives. And I think it's a smaller story that brings to light the larger story, which is everybody's interested in technology now, right? This isn't just about the CIO and the IT organization helping figure out how to automate business processes and crank reports out. It's now, in everybody's interest to figure out how to improve their customer relationships, improve their products, because they're seeing how it's happening in their own personal lives, the whole consumerization of technology world. So that's why there's a lot of energy behind it, I think. And not only that, there's so many more sources of interesting information technology and emerging technology out there now than there were before, and the level of innovation and creativity has gone so far, up that it's creating ideas and interest in all of our leaders across the C-suite.
Okay, so digital is not just about marketing, it's not just about IT, but it's a broader organizational mandate. And your study, the Digital IQ study, examines the link between digital transformation and corporate enterprise performance.
Right.
So let's explore that, because I think that's the missing piece for many of these conversations around digital. That performance piece is missing. So to begin with, how do you define performance? What are the kinds of performance metrics that you look at?
Right. So each of the participants in our survey tell us their growth rates in revenue and margin. And we use that to segment the participant group into top performers and others. The top performer segment is roughly 20% of the sample. And we correlate that group to their answers in the survey. And our survey spans strategy and innovation, operations, operating model, skill sets, project performance, measurements and metrics, a lot of leadership priority and management practices kind of questions versus the quantitative, how much do you spend on X, Y, and Z kind of questions. And so this year we did something a little bit different. We decided we were going to build a score, a digital IQ score, and see what we could learn from that. And so we formed what we thought was a set of behaviors and attributes that we thought would correlate to high performing companies, and there were 26 of them. And in our survey, we asked for a level of agreement with statements around those 26 attributes. And what we found after we analyzed the data and correlated it with the margin and revenue growth data, that there were 10 of them that were very correlated to performance. And those are highlighted in our study this year, which you can find at pwc.com/digitaliq. And so each of those uniquely are correlated to performance, and then together we create a digital IQ score, which has two interesting characteristics. Those with the top 20% digital IQ scores in our survey base were twice as likely to be top performers in margin growth, and 50% more likely to be top performers in revenue growth. So if you scored high in those 10 attributes, you were twice as likely to be a top margin grower and 50% more likely to be a top revenue grower.
So what is the magic of these particular attributes? And also, I think you should tell us what those, I know you went through briefly, but yeah, just give us a listing of those attributes. And I also just tweeted the URL, pwc.com/digitaliq, if you want to actually see the survey results while we're talking.
Right. So there's 10, and these are rated by level of agreement with the statements. So the statements are: the CEO is an active champion for digital. Digital leaders are involved in business strategy formulation. Digital strategies are business aligned and shared across the C-suite. Business and digital strategies are well communicated across the organization. We look outside the company for new ideas. Digital investments are made for competitive advantage. We effectively use all of our data to drive value. We proactively plan for cyber and privacy risks. We have a single multi-year roadmap for our digital strategy, and we consistently measure digital investments. And so those are the 10 who individually and then together correlate with performance.
Okay, so what is the common thread among these 10? What is it about these 10? Well, first off, why did you select these attributes? And what is it about these 10 that drive this correlation to higher performance?
Well, so the data selected the 10. We selected 26 of them that were organized pretty neatly, I thought, initially when we built it, across strategy, innovation, operating model, talent and skills, technology, and execution. And so we thought there was going to be a pretty well-organized framework across those dimensions. But what we found was once we did the performance correlation, only 10 of them were super highly correlated. And that's why we extracted the 10 out of the 25 or 26. So what's a common thread through these? I don't know if there's a single common thread, but one of the things that it strikes me when I think about these and when I talk about them is how important communication is. You know, and that's another one of those sort of holy grail things, I think. You know, we talk a lot about change management and communication and things like that, and those all sound like really fuzzy, hard to grasp onto things that we intuitively think are important, but we're not quite exactly sure how to get under the covers of how do you really communicate and to really drive change. And so, you know, I was at the Gartner symposium this week, and had the chance to see Jeff Immelt, who's the CEO of GE, in a fireside chat kind of interview, and talking about a CEO who's a champion for digital. I mean, Jeff Immelt, he is the poster child for this. And the interesting thing is that you know, he's up there, he's at a Gartner conference. You know, and why is the CEO of GE at a Gartner conference? Well, he's there because he believes that all industrial products companies are also going to have to be software companies to harness the data, you know, streaming off of all the sensors of all these heavy equipment, and actually to be able to drive and connect that data into, you know, performance and process improvement and innovation and all kinds of other dimensions. So, you know, he's there communicating their vision and, you know, also communicating the same inside of GE, I'm sure. And having that level of leadership is so important because, for example, you know, he talked about divesting businesses to refocus on, you know, becoming digital. And only the CEO can drive that kind of change, right? The divestitures and reinvestments, and they just recently created a digital business unit there that isn't just an overlay business unit, it's a real business, and it's going to grab all different parts of GE and put them in this digital business. And so, you know, I think leadership and communication is a big thread that goes through this. Another interesting thing around communication is when we first got these 10 attributes and saw that they were the ones that were most strongly correlated, we had a client who was running a leadership workshop and wanted to know if they could use some portion of this digital IQ study to help generate some conversation. And so we said, sure. And it just so happened I had hot off the spreadsheets the 10 attributes. So I said, let's go score these 10 attributes for what turned out to be 125 leaders across their organization to see if it would really resonate with them. And I was a little worried because, you know, they're a pretty savvy, you know, digital savvy organization. So I was a little worried that it would be kind of like they'd be off the charts and it wouldn't be very interesting. But one of the things we learned was that while they scored very highly in some of these attributes, 2 or 3 of them really created some interesting conversations for their leadership conference because, for example, you know, they believe very strongly in the need for getting value out of their data and analytics, but they didn't score themselves very high in being able to do it because they just hadn't built the capabilities yet. And so as strongly as their C-suite is behind their digital program and their CEO is a champion for it, you know, they still had a lot of room to grow around communicating throughout the organization, getting the most value out of their data, and measuring their investments. Those were 3 that popped out. So to me, it's like, you know, it's not all or nothing. Everybody's going to have a different outlook on these attributes, but hopefully it provides some guideposts for organizations to help prioritize where they're going to spend their efforts, and where, not only as a leadership team, but also within their teams and businesses.
So a key element then is the measurement, the linkage, establishing the linkage or correlation between what are the digital activities that you're undertaking and the business results. And there can be a range of business results. Now, we have a question from Wayne Anderson on Twitter, who's wondering, you mentioned innovation as being one of those potential results. How do you go about measuring innovation? How does that come into play here?
Yeah, there's a lot of dimensions to the innovation topic. Let me start with a question that we asked the survey participants around the value, sort of their reason for investing in digital. And again, digital, when we say that, we're talking about digital enterprise investments, which is basically all of the information technology investments that an organization would make for strategic value and for operational value. So we asked, what are you hoping to get out of your digital investments? And the top three answers were growth, revenue growth. And so almost 50% said, I think it was 48% said that they wanted to grow revenue. The second was improve customer experience. That was 25%. And 12% said they were trying to grow margin. So those were the top three reasons, the number one reasons that people chose. 1% said that disruption, or either trying to disrupt their markets or preparing to block disruption or defend off disruption, was their top reason for investing in digital. When we said included the top three reasons, the 92% included revenue growth, 8% included disruption. And so when we get to the innovation discussion, the vast majority of people that we surveyed said their companies are focused on growing revenue, right? Growing their current business model revenue. 8% said somewhere in their top three priorities they were focused on some sort of disruption. And so then you say, okay, let's think about that in the context of innovation. That implies that those 92%, are focused, if they have an innovation program, are focused on innovating around their core business versus, innovating for new markets and disruption and stuff, that type of thing. So I just start with that context because I think it's pretty interesting, and especially with all the buzz in the marketplace around disruption. We talk a lot about interesting companies who are disrupting food service or transportation or the hospitality, hotel businesses, whatever, automobile business. But at the same time, at least our survey base tells us that they're not actively investing in it yet. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the data next year to see if that number, starts to move up as more companies say, okay, my core business, investing in digital, I'm making good progress there. Now I'm going to start to divert more of my dollars to learning about disruptive potential in my markets. How do you measure innovation? Is something that we've tracked over the years. Before we talk about that, though, I'll throw one other idea out there, and that is that the innovation process, while it should be a process, is not the same process, should not be the same process that we use for our typical project lifecycle. So the stuff that we want to go out and get a return on investment around, because we're putting a new CRM system in that we expect to improve process throughput or increase customer lifetime value or whatever, those all have distinct ROI kind of business cases behind them that we've estimated and calculated, and hopefully we try to track afterwards to see how well we did. But the innovation process, I'm drawing a blank at who said it, but Peter Drucker said that innovation is work. And I like to think of it that way. You know, it's a different kind of work, but it's very distinctive kind of work that needs to be managed and tracked just like any other work we do, or it's going to be nebulous and we won't know what we expect out of it. We can't manage it, and then it won't happen because our leaders won't give us more money to do more innovation. And so, so the first contextual point there is that, you know, most companies say they're really not doing this disruptive kind of innovation right now. The second point is that you can't use the same sort of ROI-oriented processes to drive innovation. So how do you measure it? You know, we've asked those questions, and we've gathered data around, you know, some people measure it based on the number of ideas that they put through their innovation process. Some folks measure it based on the number of patents that they file out of that process. Some folks measure it around the number of ideas that come out of the back end of their innovation process and go into the ROI process. Some folks try to measure it in terms of the actual value that they get in the marketplace, which is a lot harder, but would be the ultimate goal if you could do that. So lots of different ways to measure it, and it is important to measure it. It's just we've got to think about it in terms of measuring different things because we're doing a different thing. We're trying to manage new ideas, to change existing processes, to create new processes and activities, to create new products, and for some people, ultimately, you know, creating new markets and new business models.
You know, Chris, I realize that digital transformation is not just an IT activity or a marketing activity, but I talk with a lot of CIOs. And one of the big questions that CIOs have today is what are the appropriate metrics that they and IT should be looking at? Because the historical metrics of IT, technical metrics, things like system uptime and latency and application availability, in today's world are pretty meaningless. Now, they're important, right? The system has to work and it has to be there. But if a CIO wants to be delivering higher value, what kind of measurements, metrics, KPIs should they be looking at?
Yeah, I think maybe working backwards from, you know, the mission and objectives of the organization and its functions is one place to start. You know, one of the things that organizations depend on the IT function to do is to help them run their technology projects. And something that's always fascinated me is the project management discipline in organizations, regardless of is it an IT project or not, just the fundamentals around managing, planning, organizing, measuring, staffing, evaluating projects tends to be in the IT function. So, you know, one of the things that I think is important is how good are you at executing projects? And one of the questions that we ask in our survey is, you know, for success rates around projects. I remember, you know, I don't know if they still do it, but the Standish Group used to do a study around project success rates, which I always looked at and was very interested in over the years. I don't know if they still do it, but we ask a similar set of questions just so we have it for our survey participants for the percentage of projects that are successfully delivered on time, on budget, and then within scope, within the originally planned scope, which I think is a little additional flair that I put in there because it's easy to cut scope and to cut budget to affect the others. But, you know, are you delivering what you set out to deliver is the third leg of that stool. So, you know, the data is, I don't recall the specific data from this year because we didn't include it in our printed report, but we'll include it in some subsequent reports that come out of Digital IQ this year. I believe it was about 2/3 of the companies said that they were on time, on budget, within scope, within planned scope. And I think whatever the delivery metrics are around executing projects, I think that would be one set of them that I think every IT organization should be focused on. And then the question is, you know, how do you attach some metrics to the broader digital enterprise, right? And so how much, how important is it to the IT organization to drive, customer appreciation and satisfaction with digital products? Should the IT organization have some kind of metrics around usability, that type of thing? I think maybe when you can start figuring out how to measure the interactions between the software and technology that an organization delivers and their customers and their satisfaction in using it, those would be some interesting things, because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to improve customer experience with one of the things we are, according to our survey participants. So how do you measure customer experience in the context of what IT can influence? So that would be another category of things that I would explore.
Yeah, that's a particularly interesting one. When you were talking earlier about project management metrics, it brings to mind several CIOs that we have had on CXOTalk, including Kim Stevenson, who is the CIO of Intel, and Brian Lilly, who is the CIO of Equinix, a large data center provider, have spoken about operational excellence and the need to deliver projects on time, on budget, according, get the results that you're looking for from your projects as a baseline for IT to establish credibility. But you ask the rhetorical question: to what extent should IT have metrics that relate to business outcomes like usability, like customer service, customer experience? And so let me put the question to you. In your opinion, how closely should IT be linked to those kinds of business-oriented metrics? Yeah,
a good question. One of the questions we ask in our digital IQ survey is, what is the role of the CIO and IT in the context of this big digital question?
Yes, tell us, please.
Right. So, the first option was everything, market-facing and internal regarding digital. The second option was internal IT functions plus technology innovation. And the third option was just IT, internal IT. And so 41% said that IT leads all digital enterprise investments. That's for currently. And while 31% said their IT was leading all internal IT efforts, including innovation, 28% leading internal IT only. So that's today, 41, 31, 28. And then we said, well, what does this look like in 3 years? And then it changes, where 36% say leading all internal IT efforts, including innovation, and 34% leading all digital enterprise investments. So basically the shift, our survey participants said they see a shift from IT's role being, the majority of them said, leading all digital enterprise investments to leading all internal IT efforts, including innovation. And so to the point around the measurement question, it depends on what you're measuring, right? If you're measuring all digital enterprise investments, then I would expect IT and the CIO to have more metrics regarding the market-facing use of technology. So does it make sense to make a very, make IT heavily incented and measured on customer satisfaction? Maybe not, but maybe it would make sense to create some more tangible measures, like do some surveys on customer engagement around the technology solutions, the apps and the websites and things like that. Maybe more metrics around, average stay on the website for customers, things like that go to point toward the usability and things like that, or maybe more direct measures around usability. So my point is, if IT is indeed leading all enterprise digital investments, then yeah, they should have some measures that are oriented around those using the technology, both internally and externally.
So Chris, we have a question from Bob Rothman, who's wondering, so who should own digital transformation? Should it be under the CIO? Should it be under the CMO? Who's responsible for this?
Yep. There's kind of two parts to the ownership. There's the ultimate owner, the how does the organization view its leaders in the context of who ultimately owns digital. So that's one, the sort of an ownership accountability point. And then there's the who's running it, driving it day to day. So we ask the question, which executive is ultimately responsible for digital enterprise investments? So if you asked me that, 5 years ago, I'd probably say, well, that's the CIO. Or maybe if you take the word investment literally, you might say CFO. But today the responses are 34% CEO, 27% CIO, 14% CFO, and 14% Chief Digital Officer. So in terms of the ultimate ownership, a third of the company said CEO is the ultimate owner of the digital enterprise investments, which I think is pretty awesome. At least it's not, so 34% of the sample out there are the Jeff Immelts of the world, and I think that's where it should be, the ultimate ownership of this stuff, because this is about creating a digital enterprise. I think, the other thing that's interesting is the Chief Digital Officer, popping up 14%. So that's, a couple hundred of our survey participants said the Chief Digital Officer was the ultimate owner of the investment. And given that that's a relatively new role, and certainly not everywhere, I think that's pretty interesting too.
So these are business projects, and they need to be driven, or rightfully should be driven, by the business owner, so to speak. Where does that leave IT and the CIO?
Yep. So one of the questions is, well, I should throw out some more data. So we ask a question. We've been doing this question for several years now too. What percentage of the enterprise technology spend is outside of the CIO's budget? And 3 years ago, it was about 35%. Last year, 50%. This year, 68%. And I mentioned I was at the Gartner Symposium where they said their number was about 50% this year. They asked a similar question. And so whether it's 68% or 50%, it's a lot. And IT doesn't control the budget anymore. It has some of it. So the question is, if we're not in a world of control anymore, we're in a world of influence. What do we do? And so I wrote a blog that sort of tried to redefine the potential roles of the CIO, on my blog, CIOdashboard.com, and talked about, it's not control anymore. It's about collaboration and communication and consultative, relationships. It's not about information as much as it is about integration. It's not about organizational control. It's about outside-in thinking. It's about bringing in the outside and being the best prepared to bring the best ideas about what's going on in the marketplace to the organization. And so, a couple of things that I think are part of this. One is if you think about where the innovation is coming from, that everybody's so fired up about, it's not coming from big organizations. And the big organizations may be the ones that end up acquiring these big ideas, but they're coming from the startup world, from incubators, from the universities, from open source, from the makers, those environments. And those environments and those places and those people are not places and people that enterprise IT or enterprise in general has expertise in. They don't integrate with them. They don't know them. They don't, love them, and they aren't them. And so a big place I think IT can define itself moving forward in this much more rapid, innovative technology world is embedding themselves in these places, these innovation places. And so that's kind of what I mean by bringing the outside in. So that's one area that I encourage, technology leaders to get smart about and to share in what they learn. And then the connection point, part two, is taking those ideas and building prototypes and demos that help to communicate. So back to those 10 attributes, a lot of those 10 attributes that correlate with performance are about communication. So one of the best ways to communicate ideas around new technologies is through demos. Demos worth a million words. So let's figure out how to build more capability within our technology world and our technology function to take those outside ideas and build prototypes and demos to communicate better to the organization what's possible. And I think integrating all those new ideas together in the organization is important as well. And I think another role for IT is to develop a much stronger skill set around integration, because more and more we're going to be bringing third-party services and ideas and cloud platforms and apps and all kinds of things that we're not building or we're not the primary builder of. But we want them to integrate with our customer data and our billing data, pricing data, all the history data that we have. And we want to get the value of all of the analytics and insights that can come from connecting all that data together, where no single third party is going to have that view like we do. So I think those are the three areas: outside in learning, demos and prototypes, and integration are the three things that I think could really help define the future for IT.
So this creates a big challenge for IT because for two reasons. Number one, many established IT organizations are run by people and employ people whose focus is technology. It's not communication. It's not thinking about organizational innovation. It's about keeping systems running. That's number one. And number two, their companies in many cases view IT as, oh, those are the people who keep the systems up. So there's a gap that has to be bridged on both sides.
Yeah, and when I say communication, I'm not saying that I think everybody in IT needs to go be a public speaker. What I'm saying is that, so if I'm an operations person and I'm seeing a lot of challenges around, penetration threats and testing. So if I'm a cyber person and that's the security area I practice in, what I'm suggesting is go figure out where some new sources of innovation around penetration testing are out there in the world, right? They're probably not coming from the large established security vendors. I mean, they're certainly thinking about those things, but go think about and learn about where those new ideas are coming from. And then build some little prototypes and demos to figure out how you could apply those in your context, and then communicate them to your peers and your leaders. That's what I mean by communication. Not so much, everybody needs to stand up and, be in the C-suite presenting their ideas.
But it's an issue of capabilities, talents, competencies, experience, and also the corporate culture inside the organization. Is the organization willing to accept IT playing a more partnership role?
Right, and so it seems pretty straightforward to me that that the organization that has their employees in it and that they've made investments in, namely IT, one of their own business functions, would be one that they'd try to figure out how to work with. But it's not always the case, and I think a lot of it is going to have to get back to the leadership question. Who's driving who's ultimately responsible for the digital investments, and what is their vision? Is their vision to create the capabilities themselves, or is their vision to partner with others to do it? And as you said, there's less and less importance on infrastructure and sort of uptime and service, fundamental baseline infrastructure service delivery, as more of that gets provided by third parties. So, we have to figure out how to shift our focus into some of these other areas.
What do you think about this notion of two-speed IT? Some people, I think Gartner calls it bimodal IT. The notion where IT is simultaneously undertaking traditional infrastructure activities, but at the same time has a group within IT that is undertaking more innovation activities?
Yeah, I think I'm bought into that idea, and I think so. For example, I'm working with a commercial real estate firm who is trying to figure out how to bring more tools to their brokers, and those tools, they have a very mobile, very intelligent, very busy set of brokers that are out there trying to do large commercial real estate deals. So they have a lot of expectations about the kinds of technology that needs to run on their phones and their tablets and things like that, and give them a lot of insight in a very short period of time, which is not a typical sort of IT software project. And so we're talking with them and doing the same with some hospitals and high tech companies and others who are building these what I call fast tech capabilities. And they're not, I think one of the reasons to do it is to attract some of these other kinds of new tech stack skill sets. If you're trying to recruit folks into sort of long form waterfall SDLC, ERP, CRM kind of environments, it's going to be nowhere near as attractive as being able to say, yeah, we've got this mobile app factory, and it's DevOps based, and we have business and IT people embedded in the teams, and we're doing weekly sprints, and we're releasing apps every month or whatever it is. I think that's a big part of being able to attract the talent and build the talent is having those separate environments. I think it makes sense because as we've learned over the years with different waves of information technology paradigms, if you will, back in the client server day or the object-oriented analysis and design days, there were some who believed that we should transform our whole IT organization into those things, into practicing distributed computing architectures or practicing object-oriented analysis and design. What we learned was everybody's not in tune with that and not a good fit for those things. And in fact, we didn't really need all those things for everybody, because the mainframe still made sense. The mini computer world still made sense for some business problems. And likewise, the web and mobile and IoT-based systems are going to make sense for certain kinds of systems, but not all of them. So I think the two-speed bimodal idea makes a lot of sense. The thing I don't like about it is it implies that they're two separate things. And the reality is they have to work together. You can't build a high-impact enterprise mobile app without access to customer data or product data or whatever, and that's not going to come from the high speed place. It's going to come from the other place, and so they have to work together. So I don't like the idea of the sense that it's split or it's bi or it's two speeds. I think it makes sense in concept, but they have to work together. You have to figure out the operating model to make them work together, because you don't want to create or you have to be very careful about creating, the haves and the have-not inside of IT.
That's a very real problem. The notion that you can create two groups of IT, as you say, the haves and the have-nots within IT, and as you say, they are one team trying to achieve common goals. Now, Chris, we're just about out of time, but before we go, based on your experience and based on your research and your data, what advice do you have to organizations who want to undertake digital and who obviously, of course, want to do it successfully? What have you learned and what can you share?
I guess maybe one thing that pops to mind, which I remember back to an insurance client of mine who was undertaking a large transformation, remaking their agent interfaces, their customer interfaces, all of their back office systems regarding and related to their claims processing, bills, policy proposals, and so on, the whole shooting match. I think back to one of the more impactful meetings that I attended with the CEO and the leadership team there, where we showed them a demo, a concept demo for what part of this future could look like. And the CEO was blown away because it gave him a chance to finally sort of visualize what all these ideas and conversations and PowerPoint decks and, meetings all meant. And so, I guess what I would say is my one bit of advice to bring a lot of these points together is build a vision that is articulated in tangible stuff. Build a vision that you can start to communicate using demos and prototypes and videos. We have some interesting videos on our digital services website at digital.pwc.com that are some examples of these art of the possible videos that help to set a vision for what's possible in the context of employees and customers and what people do day in and day out. And it really helps to bring to life what the digital future could look like through a transformation. So what I would say is use some of these techniques, especially, eat your own cooking. If you're talking about a digital transformation, use some of the digital assets like demos and prototypes and videos and things that can help bring life to the ideas. And they're very impactful and really can help to communicate in ways that, you might not have been able to communicate before.
So create context.
Yep. Digital context.
Great. Digital context. Okay.
Yep.
Well, unfortunately, we are just about out of time, and this has been a very fast 45 minutes. So thank you, Chris Curran. We have been talking with Chris Curran, who is Principal and Chief Technologist for PWC, and who for years now has been running the Digital IQ research and this has been episode number 138 of CXOTalk. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
And I hope we'll do it again sometime soon, Chris. Everybody, I'm Michael Krigsman. Thank you for joining, and please come again next time, and we'll see you next week. We'll be talking with Lee Congdon, who is the CIO of Red Hat, next week. Bye-bye, everybody.